You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 61. Today I'll be talking to Lily Seika Jones. Alright, so my name is Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is artist Lily Seika Jones. You know, I've really wanted to have Lily on the show for a while now, so I'm stoked that we were finally able to make this happen. I absolutely love the way that her work appears to be part of this bigger folklore that she's created. And we talk about what a big presence that folklore and mythology has been in her life, as well as how important it is to have a healthy work-life balance, an exciting new graphic novel project that she's working on, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Lily Seika Jones. Lily, welcome to the show. It's wonderful to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And I'm especially flattered because from what I can tell, you don't do interviews very often or like at all.
No, not at all. This is the first.
And shout out to Ben from Gallery Nucleus for connecting us. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben.
And so let's dive into your background a little bit. And from what I read, you were born in San Antonio, which is actually not very far from where I live today in Austin. But you didn't stay there. Like you were raised in Richmond, British Columbia in Canada. So tell me about that. Like how young were you when you moved to Canada and what was the reason for that?
Yeah, it's super random. I usually don't even tell people where I was born because I don't really know much about Texas or San Antonio or but yeah, no, my parents met in the States and they lived in San Antonio for a bit. So yeah, that's why I was born there. But my dad originally grew up here in Vancouver. So when I was like one or two, they moved back up here. So yeah, I have no memory of San Antonio, but I've always thought it's kind of cool that I'm from there because, you know, it's got a cool history and everything.
I remember the Alamo. I mean,
right?
Do you have any like family still here?
No, I have no connections there at all. But growing up, though, my dad was a big history buff, so I loved just reading about the history of that area. And I would love to go back at some point. So yeah, if I'm ever in the area, I'll hit you up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say a lot of people that go to the Alamo come away a little disappointed just because it is just very small. Like it's like kind of like a house. I mean, it's very small and kind of not very particularly interesting to spend a lot of time there. But it's a beautiful city, and like there's the riverfront walk, and like there's a lot of interesting stuff to do in San Antonio. I would just say, you know, constrain your expectations about the Alamo itself.
Okay. Well, thanks for the heads up.
What kind of work did your parents do? Like, were they doing anything artistic?
Actually, they're both artists.
Okay.
Funnily enough. Yeah, my dad, he does colored pencil drawings, or he did for the longest time. And they were always like depicting scenes in nature, but they always had like kind of fantastical quality to them. So I think that kind of carried over into what I do now. And then my mom does oil paintings. And she does like very romantic scenes, cottages, flower vases, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of nostalgia around what they both do. So yeah, that's kind of the environment I grew up in.
Yeah. So, I mean, just having that around you, do you feel that that's what kind of sparked your initial creativity yourself?
Oh yeah, totally. I just remember our dining room was always a mess because my mom would paint on the kitchen table or the dining room table, and it was always just covered in her oil paints. So yeah, we never really used that table for eating dinner. But both my parents really encouraged my imagination. Like my mom would do crafts with me all the time, and my dad would actually sometimes he'd get me to help him with his drawings. And
nice.
and he would listen to the stories that I used to write when I was young.
So was it something that they were hoping you would ultimately go into yourself? Was like that their dream?
They definitely weren't against it. I wouldn't say they were like pushing me into it, which was maybe a good thing because then I might have been a bit more resistant. They were just, honestly, they were both quite passive. And actually all throughout high school, I really wanted to be a paleontologist. So I don't think they knew that I was going to end up having a career in art until after university. But they always were very proud of the stuff that I made. And whenever we'd have guests over, they would pull my work out and I would go hide in my bedroom. But
hopefully that's changed a little bit. I guess, what was the area like where you grew up? The environment of the area in British Columbia that you grew up?
Yeah. So I moved around a bit when I was really young, but we stuck around the longest in Steveston, which is like a little area in Richmond, so just south of Vancouver. And I grew up next to these like wetland reserves. And so it was very like marshy, swampy, a lot of birds, herons, blackbirds. And it was pretty quiet too, which was nice. Tons of, blackberry, bramble. There was this little path that I always loved to explore when I was younger, and it was like a little tunnel through a blackberry hedge. And it reminded me of like that tunnel in Totoro that the kids walk through. And it always felt very secret. And this is kind of a funny story, but for the longest time, I thought only I knew about this trail. And it was like my secret space because the trail would lead to a little opening in a thicket, and it looked like a little room. And then one day I was there, and I loved to go when it was raining too. I love the rain, so that was another thing I was happy to grow up in, is just tons of rain. But I remember I was there once, and then there was this couple walking along the trail, and it totally devastated me. And I told my friends about it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's Hunter's Trail." And I was like, "What the hell? Like, this is a thing that people know about." But
so when you first saw those people, did you like, "Oh man, they discovered my trail, my secret trail"?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I was horrified. I ran home. It felt very violating. I was like, "Hang on, this is my secret space." But it's fine. I guess everyone should be allowed to enjoy.
Sure.
That trail.
And so I guess it sounds like you spent a lot of time in nature, and that was just a big kind of presence in your life growing up.
Yeah. I like to get out there, almost every day. And I didn't mind, being alone in nature. It was nice to kind of escape into it. And growing up reading books that took place in like fantastical lands that were inspired by like the British countryside, it was nice to kind of like be able to escape in my own way without, maybe being able to travel all the time. So, it was a good environment for that, for sure.
So you mentioned that your dad liked to listen to the stories that you wrote as a kid. So tell me about that. Like, what got you into storytelling and just writing?
Oh yeah. Yeah, my dad and my mom, they both read to me a ton when I was younger. And I still have like very vivid memories of my dad reading Lord of the Rings to me when I was really young. So I think just being exposed to those writers made me want to take a shot at it myself. And so I would write these like fantastical stories taking place in like made up worlds. And so I did a lot of world building when I was younger. And yeah, they were pretty silly. And thinking about them now, I'm a little embarrassed that I've brought this up. But see, this is why I don't do interviews, Michael. So
no, I mean, I think it's interesting. It's sort of telling, you know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, yeah, my dad was always really patient, though. I remember he would take me to this Mexican restaurant across the street, and I would read these stories to him, and they would have a lot of detail to them. Like I wouldn't just like write the story. I would also do drawings of the plant life that existed in this world, or the weapons that existed in it, and the different races of creatures. And so there was like a lot that went into it. And I even had like a file folder with all the material for these stories. And my dad would listen to all of it and get really excited about it with me. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, I think that just really encouraged me to keep developing like my imagination, I guess.
But then at the same time, you wanted to be a paleontologist. So like, why was it just that you didn't think these creative pursuits were something you could make a profession out of?
I think that was it. Yeah, I think also because art was just such a big part of what I did and what my family did, it just didn't clue in as, something that I could professionally pursue, because it was just a part of my life. Like, yeah, I make art, but, I still need to get a job. So, and I was also obsessed with dinosaurs when I was younger. And I remember I wasn't really like a Barbie or doll girl. Like my dad would take me to the toy store and ask me to pick something out, right? And I remember picking out like a Pachycephalosaurus dinosaur, or just a very specific dinosaur toy that I could then go home with and play with in the backyard. And I loved the idea of like, you know what, though? I think watching Jurassic Park also gave me an incorrect view of what the life of a paleontologist would be. So I don't think I wanted to be a paleontologist. I think I wanted to be in the movie Jurassic Park.
So I guess when did that change? Because you ended up going to the university for art and English. When did you kind of diverge from that desire to be a paleontologist?
So around 10th grade, actually, it was in 11th grade that I had this really awesome English teacher, Miss Datu, and she just really encouraged my writing. And so that kind of started to bring me back to the arts. And then I also had some really cool art teachers too. I remember one of my art teachers who actually never taught me, but he would always like pop by my art class and see what I was working on, Mr. Sharma. And he would always get really excited about the stuff that I was drawing. And so that also kind of, I think, got me thinking like, oh, maybe I could actually do art. And science class got exponentially harder and more difficult. And when I discovered that doing anything in biology required a lot of memorization, I was like, you know what, maybe I'll go into the arts. And you know what, though? My biology teacher was really disappointed that I left the sciences and pursued the arts, because the diagrams and the labs and everything that I would draw up, they were always they were very good. I also didn't know at the time that there was such a thing as becoming a paleo artist. So I think if I had known that, I might have pursued an artistic, scientific path, but another life. I actually really loved those books. Did you ever read Dinotopia?
No, it sounds familiar though. I don't know what from though.
It's like a series of picture books, and this artist, whose name has totally dropped out of my head, he would do these amazing, very detailed paintings of this fantastical dinosaur world where humans and dinosaurs lived alongside each other. And I later discovered that actually he is a paleo artist, and so he's the guy they go to when they discover a new set of dinosaur bones, and he'll imagine what this dinosaur might have looked like back in the day, and he'll paint that up. And so
it's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? Yeah, I think in another life I would have pursued that, but I'm happy with the path that I took.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of some of the stuff that people like William Stout have done over the years, doing dinosaur paintings that depicting dinosaurs in a very kind of artistic way, but also a very accurate and real way.
Yeah, I've always liked that challenge, actually, of trying to depict something in a realistic, natural way, but also in a way that transports you and sparks your imagination. And it's like you're using your art to try to build a bridge between the fantastical and the actual. And I think that challenge is what I love the most. And so I think I've been able to sort of carry that on in the work that I do now.
For sure. So what ultimately led you to, I think, University of British Columbia? What led to your decision to go there?
Yeah, I loved both English and art. And so I wanted to go to a university where I could pursue just a variety of subjects, which is why I didn't go to just an art school. I wanted to go somewhere where I could also pursue my writing or history or whatever else I was interested in. And I thought, I was also thinking of becoming an art and English teacher too. And so UBC seemed like a good spot, and it was, close enough to home. So I decided to go there, and I ended up really enjoying my time there.
And their mascot are Thunderbirds, which just seems oddly appropriate.
Yeah, right?
And I guess, so was that a double major then? Because I saw that you focused on both art and English. So did you get a double major?
Not quite. I got a major in art, and then I minored in English.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought about doing a double major, but I couldn't quite fit it into my schedule. But afterwards, I pursued both in the teaching program, and I ended up doing my practicum and getting to experience being an art and English teacher at a high school. And yeah, during that time, it was incredibly stressful, and it sort of made me realize oh, maybe teaching isn't my thing.
I guess, what is it that you thought would have been, what did you like about teaching that made you want to originally go that path?
Well, I loved the teachers that I'd had at McMath at my high school in Richmond. And I guess I thought it would be cool to connect with people at that point in their life when they're just trying to figure out what they want to do. And I think just the idea of learning from young kids, but then also them learning from you. And I think it's a cool relationship, just and one that, you can influence a lot of people at the same time. So yeah, I think I also had this idea too that as a teacher, I would still be able to pursue my other passions on the side. But then talking to other teachers in the field, it seemed like it was a lot more of a demanding job than I realized. And I do know some teachers who are able to publish books and pursue other things. But I just don't think I had the mental capacity for that.
I mean, didn't you end up getting a teaching certificate though? So you seemed like you were pretty committed to that for a while.
You know what? I was. And I passed that practicum by the skin of my teeth, man. And it was cool. Even though it was so difficult, I did have a good time. And I also thought you know what? I'm just going to see this through. And so I did get certified. Yeah. And after, once I was done the program and, needed to find a job, I applied to a bunch of places, but I couldn't find work. And I also didn't want to leave the city and work somewhere remote. So while I was waiting to hear back from all of the places that I'd applied to, I decided to start teaching private art classes. So I did that for a summer in Steveston, where I'd grown up. And so I was teaching maybe a handful of kids, maybe 5, 6, 7 kids, from 8 to 11. And actually teaching that small group as opposed to teaching 30 kids in a classroom, I really enjoyed that. Actually, one of the girls that was in one of my classes, she's an actress now, and
oh, wow.
in that Netflix movie, To All the Boys I've Loved Before, she's the youngest daughter.
Wow.
I'm sure she doesn't remember me, or if she does, she.
That's amazing, though. I mean, you taught for a summer, and you had a famous student already.
I know, right? It's kind of cool.
That's awesome. And so, I guess while you were in school, what type of mediums were you working in? As far as your artistic side of that program, were you working in watercolors already, or was it just kind of a variety of mediums that you were exploring?
It was a variety, yeah. I actually really got into acrylics and doing these huge paintings, 48 by 48 inch paintings. And actually, during university, I got rid of my bed and ended up sleeping on the floor in my room because I needed more room to work on my art.
Wow.
And so I got really good at just sleeping anywhere. And I never regretted that decision. I didn't even stop to consider, maybe this is a little, but but my room, this is what my bedroom looked like while I was at university. It was basically just a coffee table, a circle wooden table with chairs, because I had this idea that I could turn my bedroom into a cafe where other artists could come and visit. That never happened. I think the only people that would come visit me in my cafe bedroom were my brother and a couple of my friends. But
that's amazing. I mean, where did you imagine you were sleeping during this time? I mean, while people were having coffee and talking about art.
Oh, I had a great window seat set up. Yeah, I could sleep anywhere. Actually, there are a couple times my dad would find me passed out under the kitchen table because I'd stayed up so late working on essays and stuff. I was a really good procrastinator. Yeah.
So I guess, after you graduated in 2014, and it sounded like you were trying to become a teacher for a while. Was that, I guess, I'm trying to align the timing with when you moved to Seattle, because I know you lived in Seattle for a period. Was that right after college, or was that a little bit later?
That was a year after I graduated.
Okay.
After I graduated, and I had that chunk of time where I was sort of just floating around, and I hadn't yet found a teaching job, but I was teaching a couple private classes. So in that year, before I moved to Seattle, that's when I started my Etsy shop. And so that Christmas, I decided to work on a line of Christmas cards just for my friends. And so I ended up doing these ink drawings of just like funny characters. Like I did this line of Christmas cards that I called Santa's Other Reindeer. And I was like, these are the reindeer that aren't in the poem. And so I drew these like anthropomorphic reindeer, like, you know, Leonard, the literary reindeer. And he's just like a fat reindeer in a suit that reads a lot. And then I did like Bjorn, the existential reindeer. And he's like a reindeer that's just looking at his reflection in an ornament. And so I had a lot of fun just doing like these fun cards. And I think it was just how I responded to doing all this like very theoretical, heavy stuff in university. Like I did these really big sort of mythological inspired paintings. And so I think after all that, like working in oils and acrylics and all that, all those messy mediums, I thought it was nice to kind of go back to doing these very small, detailed ink drawings. And it was kind of the style that I had played around with when I was younger. And like through high school, I loved to do like just fun little drawings of like dragons or characters or whatever popped into my head. So I kind of went back to that to sort of reground myself, you know? And I ended up, so after I like came out with these cards, I decided like, oh, maybe I can just start selling these. And I opened an Etsy shop, and then I started doing a couple of craft shows around Vancouver. And, but in my last year of the teaching program, I got married. So that's why I moved to the States. I should throw that in. Yeah. It was a long distance thing. But my husband at the time lived in Boston. And so we were long distance for a year. And then we decided that since we both know people in Seattle, and since I have dual citizenship because I was born in San Antonio,
all right,
it just made sense to move to Seattle. And so I moved down there, about a year after I graduated, and I was a barista for like my first year and a half there, just to, kind of get my feet off the ground. But during that time, I kept working on my Instagram and my Etsy shop, and I was doing a lot of freelance work. Actually, I was doing a lot of custom pet portraits.
Where did those come in from? Was that through your social media, like where you got those commissions?
Yeah, so I think it started with friends or people I know, and then as I shared more on social media, I got more jobs, and I went back to watercolors, which is the medium that I had been most comfortable with when I was in high school. So at 11th grade, I started taking private watercolor classes actually at it was like a local art shop in Steveston called Phoenix Art. And the teacher there, Mark, he was great. And he actually taught me all the fundamentals of doing watercolor paintings. So I went back to doing watercolors, and that's the medium I worked in when I started doing these like pet portraits and stuff. And
is it something that you didn't have time to do during college? Like, were you not able to do watercolors during college? Did you kind of give that up for a period and then come back to it?
I kind of did. I don't know why. I think I just really wanted to experiment with as many mediums as I could while I was in college. And I actually really got into film photography. Yeah, I liked working with acrylics and working big and doing like big expressive pieces. It was just very, cathartic, and watercolor is such a controlled, quite difficult medium to work with. Whereas working in acrylics is so much more forgiving. So yeah, it was a nice change. But I eventually went back to watercolors because it was definitely less expensive, and I don't know. There was a couple of reasons where it just made sense. Like I liked how it wasn't as, say, toxic or fumey is working with oils, and with acrylics, like I had less space also when I moved into like my little 1-bedroom apartment with my then husband. And so I guess I went back to work. Like I worked really big and on a really large scale in university, but when I moved to Seattle, it made more sense to me to work really small.
While you were in Seattle, were you very active in like the art community? I'm kind of curious what that community was like there and if you were involved with it.
Yeah, I am very shy and not great at networking. So I was very involved in like the online, or it was easier to get involved in the online community through Instagram and stuff. But I wouldn't say I got super involved with the art community in Seattle. Also, I had a hard time, I guess, trying to figure out where the illustration community was in Seattle. There was definitely like a prominent fine art community, but the illustration community was a little bit elusive. Then again, I don't think I tried very hard to find it, but when Nucleus Portland reached out to me, I started connecting a lot with the Portland community, which was cool because everyone there just seemed super, super cool and always willing to like give me advice when I needed it.
And so was that connection with Nucleus Portland, was that like your first entrance into more of a gallery setting? Like, had you started showing before then? Because I know your CV, the first show that you list is a show at Nucleus Portland in 2018. But was that your first time showing? Was with them?
Yeah, that was my first time showing with them, and that was definitely like my first big art show. But I actually. Technically the first show I ever did was back in Vancouver, and it was right before I moved. And the show itself happened after I'd already moved to Seattle, so I ended up having to bring my paintings back to Vancouver. But it was at this gallery that I think closed down, called the GAM Gallery, right in downtown Vancouver. And I didn't sell a single painting at that show.
Aww.
It's fine, but I was really, and to this day, I'm still really proud of all the pieces that I did for that show. It was called Deep Think Thoughts, and it was inspired by the stories that I had actually been writing at university. So I never did stop writing stories like how I did when I was younger. And so this gallery approached me about doing a show just in their back room. So I just had 7, 8 paintings in the back, and they were watercolor paintings, and they were just random images of scenes from stories that I had been writing. And it was a fun show, and I still have like the paintings because I never sold them, but yeah, so that was the first show that I ever did. And it was a little disheartening, not having sold a single piece. So it was cool though when Nucleus reached out and I did a show with them. I think I sold every piece at that
nice
exhibit. So that was a real boost of confidence. And I think that's what made me think like, oh, maybe I could pursue this.
Well, and I think that speaks to, the fact that you have to find the gallery that fits your art, that their customer base is aligned with your art style. And it may have been that first gallery just wasn't aligned in the right way. And they, Nucleus Portland was very much more.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah. And Nucleus Portland is also very inclusive, especially with traditional artists. And so I guess, it was cool to kind of show alongside other artists that definitely seemed to vibe with the kind of art I was doing. I definitely felt like I found the community that I'd been looking for, people who just have these wild imaginations. And
So how did you make that connection? Did they reach out to you? Did you kind of solicit to them? Like, how did that come together?
Yeah, they reached out to me, I think through Instagram. And I think I first did a group show with them. So it kind of gave them an idea of like the kind of stuff that I do. And then they invited me to do a 2-person show alongside Amy Earls, who's also a really awesome oil painting artist. And yeah. So that's kind of so I feel pretty lucky that they reached out, and
that's awesome.
It was very exciting.
Well, and you've shown with Talon and Antler and other galleries in the Portland area. I guess why do you think that Portland has just become such a big market for your work in general?
I don't know. I think part of it is that I never really stopped trying to depict the stories and the worlds that I've been building in my head. And I feel like the crowd in Portland loves, discovering work that sort of opens up like a new world, I guess.
It's interesting that you have these kind of regional regional communities that have a different kind of taste and a different vibe, and I just kind of noticed that your work tends to be focused more in the Portland area, so that was interesting. And one thing that I also noticed looking at your CV was that it seems like every year since that 2018 show, you've done a solo show, like once every year. Is that like a comfortable pace for you, having like one big show a year? Is that kind of what you're aiming for?
Yeah, it's funny that you ask that, because this past year, so I've definitely, actually, after when the pandemic hit, it definitely caused me to stop and ask myself, like, what a realistic work cycle is for me. And working, like, putting out one show a year, it definitely got to the point where I was sort of hitting, like, I guess, my max capacity for what I was capable of. And I do like having like something to work towards every year. Actually, about 4 years ago, I think I just completely burnt myself out because I started getting these like insane panic attacks. And it got pretty bad. And it started with me working really late one night. And I remember I stood up really quickly while I was working and I threw out my back. And so that whole week, my back was thrown out, and I had been working on a solo show. And then a couple days later, I ended up getting like these really bad panic attacks. And so that's when I realized, like, okay, maybe I need to like slow things down. But so I started like doing less extra work and just focusing on just one show a year. I found I could still do, but doing extra group shows and trying to do extra work on top of that, I think was a bit much for me.
So the change that you made was just to kind of narrow your focus to the one show and not have all these other things that you're trying to juggle at the same time? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And actually this most recent show that I just had a couple months ago at Nucleus, I would say that working on that show was definitely the most comfortable that I'd been. And I think it was because I'd learned how to say no to just other galleries and other commitments that normally I would try to take on.
Was that hard, making that adjustment to say no, to feel comfortable saying no?
Oh, it was very difficult. Yeah, it was very hard. But and then also I have a lot of like ideas for personal projects that I would like to work on, and so making the decision to just make more time for work that's really meaningful to me, but might not necessarily make me all the money that I want to make. It's very difficult. I mean, you're basically it feels like you're rejecting money, which is always a very uncomfortable thing to do, especially as an artist. Like,
Sure.
you should take what you can get, right?
No, but I mean, I think as far as like just maintaining a good mental health, like there's importance to that, having the time to really, do something that's meaningful to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I definitely let my mental health get to a pretty bad place. Like I mean, even just over a year ago, I had a psychiatrist diagnose me with agoraphobia and panic disorder because, I think, I had still been trying to work out just that work-life balance. And also I was going through a couple of tough things last year. Like one of the reasons I moved back to Vancouver from Seattle was I split up with my husband at the time. And that year I had signed myself up for like 5 different shows. And that wasn't including a solo show that I'd also agreed to. So I ended up dropping out of those 5 shows, which was very difficult, but I'm really glad that I did that. And actually this past year, like my mental health has just improved exponentially. And so
it's amazing.
It's going really well. I mean, there was a point when I was scared to go to the grocery store across the street, but now I can, take a train down to Portland for my show.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it's cool.
No, I mean, I think the past 2 years have been quite difficult for a lot of people in that same way, just adjusting to what the world has become and, avoiding constant state of dread that, so I mean, I completely appreciate what you're saying. I think a lot of people have had similar type of experiences in their own ways. I think we've all kind of dealt with this differently. But then also to have 5 shows, personal things going on with your relationship, all of that happening at the same time, you have to imagine the toll that was taking on you. So I'm glad that you're able to kind of come out of that and recognize a healthy balance that works for you in the end. Yeah,
actually, and working on the medieval critters that I've been doing most recently, that was actually a huge help to me. And I think I started doing them like right before the pandemic, like in 2020. And so just something about drawing these like cute, vulnerable creatures I really related to, but then arming them with weapons or armor or just anything to help them out in the world. I think that spoke to me, and I think it spoke to other people too. A part of me was worried, like just with all my mental health stuff, like, oh, my art is going to suffer because of this, and there's also this idea that like as an artist, you kind of sacrifice yourself for, the great art. Like all the great artists have the suckiest lives. So, if your life is sucky, that means you're doing it right. But, you know what I mean? Like there's that idea that like, and I think it's gotten better, but there's still like, we put past artists on a pedestal and admire the toll that it took on their body and mind. But I've sort of been reprogramming to get out of that. And luckily, like, I don't think my art did suffer because of, all the craziness happening. But I think part of the reason is I decided to just jump into my art as a source of comfort. And so, yeah, I feel like just the past few years, learning how to prioritize like my health and just trying to make stuff that feels more authentic. It's actually been, it's actually turned out pretty good.
Nice. And so I guess going forward, do you feel like you have a pretty strong like framework to work with now and that will maintain that kind of positive mental health?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like I said that not very confidently, but yeah, no, definitely. And the fact that I'm just overall, I think, functioning better proves that. And yeah, like actually, my next solo show isn't until next fall. And that was a very conscious decision to give myself like enough time to sort of recover after a show. And so I think I've definitely gotten a lot better at creating a timeline that works with just what I want.
Yeah. Well, and I guess like with anything, it's a matter of just maintaining that and constantly just, checking in with yourself. Because I think a lot of times you put yourself in a good spot and then you kind of neglect it over time. And then until something happens and forces you to think about it again. Yeah. And then you're back at the beginning and it's sort of this cycle. But kind of just constantly checking in with yourself, I think is an important thing. And it sounds like you're in a really good spot. So I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, totally.
So you mentioned, that you've gotten to the point where you're able to take trains to your shows in Portland. Is that something that you do regularly? Like when you have a show, because you do show in a different city where you live. So do you try to go make those shows in Portland when you have them?
Yeah, I do. Last year, I think was the first time I wasn't able to make it to my show. But I mean, I was in Canada and the border was closed and yeah, not much I could do about that. But I do like to go to my shows and to my openings when I can. It's always very nerve-wracking though, and I always get really sweaty and anxious. And the first opening I went to in Portland, actually, that was very anxiety-inducing. And I'm surprised my panic attacks didn't hit then because it was a lot. But it's also very exciting too, and it's cool going to them and just being able to like talk to people face to face as opposed to just reading comments online and whatnot. Like sometimes I also get very nervous at going to the shows because I feel like I'm not great at talking about my work in person, and also like sometimes I think I miss certain social cues or I don't know. I get very nervous. I'm a very anxious person. So it's always a big deal for me when I go, but I feel like it's always a nice sort of, it's always nice to sort of, hear what people think about your work in person. And it's like a nice source of validation, I just remember at one of the openings, someone came up to me and they wanted to talk to the artist, but I thought they wanted to talk to like Stella or Charles or one of the gallery owners. So I just directed her to them and I was like, oh, there they are. You can go over there. And she was like, oh no, I wanted to talk to you. And I was really taken aback. And I was like, oh, why? So if you ever go to one of my shows and you see someone looking very uncomfortable in the corner, that's me.
Be sure to ask to speak to the artist.
Yeah.
And speaking of talking about your art, let's talk about your art a little bit.
No, just kidding.
And so one of the things, just reading up on your bio on your site, you list some of your interests, including mythology and folklore, which obviously I think based on the conversation we've had so far wouldn't be a surprise to anybody considering, the type of experiences you had growing up. You also mentioned nature in the natural world as an interest. So I guess, with mythology and getting into incorporating that into your work, obviously you had it as an interest in your writing and your reading, but how did it become kind of a central focus for your artwork?
Yeah. I'd always loved, like, I always got a lot of inspiration from mid-century illustrators like, Tolkien or Arthur Rackham or Kay Nielsen or John Bauer. And these guys always loved to illustrate like fairy tales or like mythologies. But also their depiction of the natural world was always to me like super impressive. And I just loved the way that they blended all of these things. And so I learned a lot of the techniques I use now by actually just like looking at their work and then trying to emulate it in my own stuff. And just like whenever I'd get stuck, or actually one of the best ways, or one of like the most efficient ways for me to come out of like a, what's it called, like a creative block, is I'll pull up like some tales from mythology or from folklore, or sometimes I'll just pull up like poems, or I'll flip open one of my favorite books and I'll read a passage and I'll just immediately get inspired or have an idea, and I'll be able to move past that creative block. So I guess that's the main reason I bring all of these different influences into my work, is they're all ways for me to just keep moving past my own, like, or they kind of help me get out of my head, you know, and I just forget about like, I feel like I'm always trying to find ways to trick myself into making work and forgetting that I do this for money, because I find that that's so when I get lost in these stories or in these tales, it's like for a sec I forget that, oh, this is my profession, and instead I just think about ways that I can illustrate these things.
No, I think that's awesome. I mean, I think that's I feel like that's just a human experience in general. Like if you're focused so hard on solving a problem or doing a thing, sometimes you just have to step away and think about something else, or think about something else that you enjoy, and then the ideas start coming to you, you know? Yeah,
totally. And I think that's why I always tried to like stay connected to all my other interests, especially in like in English and literature, because I found that like if I just stuck with art, you just end up getting trapped in your mind. But if you're able to like jump out of that and explore other areas, like I find that that's definitely like the best way to sort of stay inspired.
Awesome. So, I mean, even to this day, it's something that you continue to stay connected with?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I still write. I think I probably write more than I sketch, actually. Like if you look at my sketchbooks, it's mostly writing, because I just love, I just love it.
So the stories that you write, are they stories about the characters that you end up illustrating?
Yeah, actually there's one character and he pops up continuously in my shows. And I like this idea, actually, that if you've been to all my shows, you start to notice the patterns. Like there's this one guy, and actually I don't think he was in my last show, but he's been in all my previous shows. And he looks like an anthropomorphic cat man, like Gandalf, but if he was a cat. So he's like this really old, wrinkly cat man, and he's a character I came up with in university, because I just had this like. Do you want me to tell you the story behind it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I had this idea, like, I loved watching the neighborhood cats, and there was this one cat I saw that loved to walk along the dikes and ditches, and because Steveston is basically below sea level, right? So it's intersected by all these dikes and all these ditches, which also shaped like the work I do now and why I love marshland animals so much, because I loved like muskrats and toads and but anyways, so there was a cat that used to walk along this dike, and I always wondered like what the cat was doing there, and he was always just sitting on the edge just watching. And I had this idea that like, okay, maybe this cat is just collecting stories and he just watches the world. And I thought like, okay, when a cat dies, what if, they come to death with all these stories, and maybe the stories are really like, really cool. I feel like I'm explaining this a lot worse than how I've written it in my journal.
No, it's interesting. Like, I mean, it's almost like this wise old storyteller in cat form. I love it.
Yeah. Okay. So his name's Aesop, the cat character. And basically he is, a collector of stories. And when a cat dies, they enter his study. And I just picture him in this like study in an old armchair, and he'll make a pot of tea, and the cat will tell him everything the cat saw while they were alive. And if the story's good enough, Aesop will send the cat back up to the world. Wow. And basically, if you keep collecting great stories, you can keep having infinite lives. And so that's how I figured cats have multiple lives. And so that's who this character is.
That's amazing. I mean, it's incredible just hearing the story behind. I mean, we see a glimpse of that story that you just told me in your paintings, but there's such a rich story behind it. So, I mean, have you ever thought about publishing any of these stories behind the works that you make?
I have, and that's one reason why I took off so much time until my next show. I'm actually working on a graphic novel right now.
Oh, nice.
And I've never made one before, so it's been a pretty huge learning curve, and I definitely need all of my resources to work on it. But yeah, every painting you see in my show is just a snippet of this larger story that I've been working on, and I've just never made the time to work on it. And part of the reason is, you know, I don't have the best time management skills, and another part of the reason is I have enormous imposter syndrome. And so I've just never thought that these stories are, you know, I just figured it was a risk I wasn't willing to take. But I feel like I've gotten to a point where my art is doing pretty well, that I can sort of take a risk with that. So yeah, I'm working on it.
That's amazing. No, that's awesome. I mean, have you already gotten like a publisher lined up, or is it just something you kind of been doing, preliminarily?
It's something I've just kind of been working on, and I do have publishers in mind. And actually, I have published a book that I didn't write. So a couple years ago, I published a compendium of magical creatures. And it combined my love of science with my love of art, because I was able to do these like medical sort of like diagrams of different magical creatures, like a cross section of a mermaid or whatever, like stuff like that. So I've dipped my toes into the publishing world. And also moving back here, I was able to connect with some illustrators in the neighborhood, like in Vancouver and Richmond. So I've been getting some guidance and mentoring on how to put a graphic novel out there. So I feel like I have all the tools and the connections. I just need to, do the thing.
No, that's exciting. So these stories that you've been creating for what sounds like your entire life, are these stories rooted in like your own personal experiences? Are they telling your stories but just in a different way, or are these complete, fiction that you've kind of made up, or some combination of those things, I guess?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination, and I think that's part of the reason why it's been so difficult, because some of the themes that I'm tackling are quite tricky and maybe a little bit triggering for me. But it's actually been very cathartic working on it for that reason. But I have to take it really slow. Like, if I spend, a whole week working on my graphic novel, I will inevitably start getting hit with like a couple of anxiety attacks, because I've spent too much time. You know, when you spend like a little bit too much time sort of digging into your past and into like your childhood and everything. So it's great to have like my other work, like the work I sell on Etsy or the work I do for Nucleus, because it sort of helps me step back and take a break from that until I'm able to go back in again.
That makes sense. And you mentioned the compendium book that you worked on. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. I guess, what was your experience like collaborating? Like, how do you like collaboration? What was that experience like working on that book?
It was really cool. Yeah. And I love collaborating, because doing what I do, it can sometimes get a bit lonely, just like working alone in my studio every day, And so, I love it, but it's also, it was cool. It was a nice change to have a team of people that I could, work with, and also it was a really great team that I worked with too. Like the author was just regularly sending me all this material, and you know how I'm so inspired by literature. And so it was cool to just be receiving this constant stream of really great writing on just like these magical creatures. And then my agent for that book, Adria, she was really great at also giving her 2 cents on like what would make this drawing better or what would make the writing better. And it was kind of cool to just be like bouncing off this team with just all my work and sort of like, yeah, I don't know, like it was really rewarding, and like it was cool being part of a team. And then when the book was finally done, being able to step back and see what they'd done, like what the designers had done and what like the editing team had done. It was all very like, magical.
I guess the process that you used for creating the art piece that you used, was it similar to the processes that you use for your personal work, or did you work in kind of a different way?
Actually, it was different. I ended up doing it mostly in pencil crayons, colored pencils. So I'd actually done some colored pencils with my dad way back, because that's the medium my dad worked in. So it was a mix of like watercolor and colored pencils, and it was a lot of drawing as opposed to painting. And it was very precise because I was doing these diagrams and stuff. And so, yeah, it was definitely different. I definitely it was the hardest I'd ever worked on something too. And so I'd never done anything that demanding, because usually I work on my own schedule, right? But working on this book, I had to like be aware of other people's timelines and stuff. So that was an adjustment. That was a bit tricky. And I actually moved my desk from my usual workspace into a closet, and I would just work in the closet with the doors closed so that I would actually get stuff done. And then before you know it, it was 8 a.m. and
oh no. I mean, it sounds terrible.
Yeah, see, this was before I learned how to have a work-life balance.
So we're hearing the lead up to the problems that you experience later.
Yeah, I mean, and also when you're working with colored pencils, you're constantly like using pressure, right? Whereas when you're painting, you can just hold the brush lightly. And so my hands would get cramped constantly. And oh God, my diet was terrible. I was drinking like Monster energy drinks and eating chips like late into the night. But I loved it at the time because I just fed off of that like adrenaline and sort of like, I mean, I've always been a procrastinator. So I think that was just working like that used to be my comfort zone. I mean, even in university, I remember having like a 20-page paper due the next day, and I would start it the day before, and I would still get an A, so I never learned. I got to the point where my body literally was like, okay, you need to stop, and basically just, took over.
Well, I mean, it's good that you listen to that. So as far as your personal process goes, how do you usually, arrive at your ideas for, a new piece or a new body of work? Is it very kind of an intentional exercise where you do brainstorming activities like word lists, or is it more of a natural kind of organic thing that just comes to you?
It's definitely more organic and intuitive. I find that whenever I try to do it intentionally, or I try to sort of, force it, then my work just becomes very strained, or the process is just more painful for me. But so normally how I start a piece is I will just look through all of my reference photos that I've taken on my nature walks. Because whenever I go for a walk, I'll just take a million photos of everything I see, like mushrooms, tree stumps, the cattails at the marshes, and I'll just go through like thousands of photos, and I'll wait until a photo speaks to me. So like, for instance, one of the pieces in my last show, it depicted a cat drinking tea next to a mossy rock. And that rock, I'd actually taken a picture of it last year from a hike that I did. And looking back on it, there was something about it that just spoke to me. And so I decided to just start sketching it. And so usually what I'll do is like when a photo speaks to me, I'll just start drawing it in my sketchbook. And then usually something just kind of appears.
Sounds so magic. It's like magic. Like,
yeah, it is though. And it's kind of cool though, because it always surprises me. It's cool that I can still sort of get surprised in the process, you know, like, there are some aspects of the process that I do control though. So like, for instance, I've found that if it's raining and I'm sitting in a cafe, like that's a really great environment for me to try to come up with something. So I think when I did draw that mossy rock cat piece, it was actually raining and I was in a cafe and I just started sketching, or sometimes I'll make a cup of tea and I'll have a cookie with that, and I'll just be set up in my armchair with my little wooden table. And so there's like certain things about my environment that I can control to help bring about that magical moment where, oh, something has popped onto the page and it's pretty cool. So I'm just going to keep drawing it, I guess.
It's cool that you've kind of recognized and identified the environmental surrounding that you need to be creative and kind of just fostering that around you.
Yeah. And it definitely helps to have like a pile of books nearby too.
Right. And so I guess once you do have a solid idea for a piece and you've kind of identified that you want to go forward with that idea, do you start like fleshing out the composition in drawing form, or do you just kind of jump right into painting? Like how much pre-work do you do before you start on a piece?
It's kind of evolved over the years. So now, when I start a piece, I'll usually do just a small thumbnail sketch, just very rough in my sketchbook. And then I'll usually do like a quick little color sketch, just planning out what the color composition will be. And then after that though, I'll just jump right onto like the final paper and I'll just carefully, draw the whole image. And then from there, it's just layer upon layer of watercolors. But the most frightening stage in that whole procedure is when it gets to the point where I have to paint like the final piece. Because if I haven't planned it out that great, sometimes I'll jump in and I'll be painting it for a week and then I'll realize I actually hate this color composition. And so I'll have to restart the whole thing, which is why I do that, which is why I do a little color composition thumbnail before I start, because there's nothing worse than, restarting something. But occasionally I will just jump straight in without any preparation because I'm so confident in what the idea is that I feel like, oh, yeah, it'll just happen. It's a very organic process. And in earlier shows, like the first show I did at Nucleus, some of the drawings from that show, I didn't even sketch them out. I didn't even know what they would end up looking like. Like I remember one of the pieces, and it's on really expensive paper too. So it's like, so this is how I get my thrills, when this is the equivalent to skydiving, when I just decide to jump straight in. But no, I remember one piece, I started just drawing a branch because like the branch looked really cool and it just spoke to me. So I just started drawing it, and then I saw a face in the branches and I realized it was Aesop, that cat character. And so I just threw him in there and I just drew him with the branches. And I just kept adding stuff that felt right. And when I was done, it was like one of my favorite pieces from the show. So I love when kind of like happy accidents like that happen.
Yeah. I mean, you've described a couple of different cases just now where the nature that you got excited about drove the idea for the piece rather than the character. Is that a common thing? Like, do you tend to start with what does that natural environment look like and then insert a character into it?
Yeah, I would say more often than not, that's how I go about it, is I'll see a log and think, oh, that log's pretty cool. And, or, I'll see a stick and be like, oh, this stick is pretty cool. I need to find a way to make a story. Like, there's definitely a story there. I don't know what it is, but I know it's there. I collect a lot of sticks and things when I go out on walks. Like, I was on a walk with my friend a couple weeks ago, and we were just like walking her kid around town. And I stopped at one point on the sidewalk and I was like, oh my God, this stick is so cool. Can I just, and I was like putting stuff in her stroller to carry home. Like, honestly, my stick collection is one of my favorite collections. And I'm trying to find a way to display them all because I think they're so cool.
That's awesome.
And that's how I started drawing like these medieval characters, because I picked a stick up and I thought, oh, this looks like a little bow and arrow. Maybe I can do a little animal with bow and arrow.
And so while you're painting on a piece that you've kind of gone to that stage with, do you tend to focus entirely on it until it's done, or do you work on multiple pieces to kind of break stuff up?
When I'm doing a show, I definitely have to take it one piece at a time. Yeah, when I'm working on one piece, like that piece is my whole world. And I find that it's easier if I can just focus on it. But sometimes I will have other activities that I will break it up with. Like, I'll be working on this one painting and maybe I'll finish the drawing stage. And then I'll step away and do some writing or draw something silly and totally different. But yeah, I'm rarely working on multiple paintings at a time because I find that, that just doesn't work for me.
And so, we talked a little bit about creating a creative environment for you to work in, and the fact that watercolors do give you kind of the freedom to work wherever you want because there isn't those toxic elements that you might have in oils. So do you tend to work in a dedicated studio space that you've kind of curated, or is it working from home? Like, what's your work environment like?
It's been different over the past few years, but yeah, more recently I'll usually just create like a dedicated corner in my home space. And I have had studio spaces in the past, but actually I found that I prefer just having a dedicated spot where I live because I feel like the other areas in my life just bleed so naturally into my art that, like, when I have a studio space, there's always something that I've forgotten or wish I had access to back home. And it's just easier if I can work at home because then I can just very quickly grab, a book that I suddenly want to look at, or I can like jump over to another table and do some crafting and then jump back to my workspace. So I like having stations set up in my home, and then I can sort of move around them as the mood strikes.
Well, and you have your stick collection at home.
And I got my stick collection at home. I also have an acorn collection. So when my anxiety was really bad and I would get scared walking anywhere, anytime I would go to the post office to drop off orders, I would always pick up acorns or need to bring acorns with me because I found that rubbing them was very comforting.
Oh,
and
nice.
So I have this huge acorn collection. And actually, I started playing D&D a couple months ago, and my character in D&D also has a huge acorn collection. So, my my creative life and my actual life there's a lot of overlap there.
No, that's awesome. I guess the one thing about working from home though, like the risk in that is being protective of your work-life balance. You know, we talked a little bit about that earlier. So I guess how do you approach that in a way that maintains that healthy work-life balance that you want?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing I do is I've actually gotten really good at just blocking off time dedicated to work and time dedicated to not work. And also I never bring my work into my bedroom. So when I'm like winding down at the end of the day, I'm able to sort of just separate that aspect of my life and just, read or write or do something not related directly to whatever I'm working on. It's definitely tricky, and sometimes I still end up compromising myself and find that I've sort of let things spiral a bit out of control, but I'm always able to bring it back. But yeah, I think just being really good about time management and then also separating my space really well. Like right now, my space is kind of split in half, and half of my living area is like, watching TV or doing hobbies or whatever. And then the other half of my space is just working on shows or working on my book or, doing work stuff. So yeah, it's tricky, but I think I'm managing it.
Are there days that you just completely take off? Like, or do you take the weekends off? Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I do take the weekends off actually. And that's been really helpful. It took me a while though to get to that point where I could just let myself relax on the weekend. And I still end up sometimes working on the weekend. But usually if I do work on the weekend, it's because something really fun, like a fun idea occurred to me and I know it would be a lot of fun to work on. So I'll just do that. But Sundays, actually, I make sure to never work.
Nice. Day of rest.
Day of rest, yeah. I'll usually watch like an unhealthy amount of TV and eat something disgusting. And
What shows are you watching? Any good shows right now?
I am, yeah. I'm watching a lot of cartoons, which I love. I love Gravity Falls. So that's kind of been that and Bob's Burgers have both been my go-to. Actually, I love putting on Bob's Burgers because it totally helps me get my mind off the kind of work that I do. It's like the exact opposite of what I do. So it's like it's a nice brain break.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So let's talk about what you have coming up. And we talked a little bit about the fact that you have a show coming up at fall of next year.
Yeah.
I guess, what does the rest of 2022 look like for you? Have you already started working on that show, or what's your focus going to be for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I've already been sketching up ideas in my sketchbook for that show. And because I have so much time before it happens, it's going to be probably my most ambitious show to date. And I'm pretty excited for it. And also in a couple weeks, I'm going to Scotland with Light Gray Art Lab and doing like an RPG themed tour around there, like staying in castles and
wow.
going in nature and checking out a bunch of cool stuff. So I think that's going to feed into my show as well.
No, it's awesome. And also your graphic novel. So that's
my graphic novel. I mean, that's probably going to take up most of the time. And my hope is that I'll have I'll be able to get it published by, I'm scared to say too much about it, but my goal is to get enough done that I can find a publisher for it before the end of the year. But I've already done a lot of work on it, so I'm pretty confident.
So I guess, and not having done anything in the publishing world, like how much of it do you need to have done before you feel comfortable actually approaching a publisher?
Well, I spoke to an author, a comic book author, a couple months ago, and he told me that usually you would want to have at least 12, maybe 15 pages totally done, and then the rest of the story outlined. And I'm planning to do an 80-page novel, and I've already got the outline done and everything, and I've already got a lot of it storyboarded. So I basically just need to come up with the first little chunk, and then I'll be able to approach someone. So yeah, I've actually done a lot of work for it. I even drew a map for it, for the world, and it's kind of inspired by the marshes that I grew up in. So just
that's exciting.
It's gonna be very never-ending story meets
I love it.
The Last Unicorn. Just
that's amazing. I love Never-Ending Story. I grew up with that. That and The Princess Bride were two staples of my childhood.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and The Dark Crystal.
Yeah. And so, does it have a title yet? I mean, I don't want to. If you're not comfortable talking about too much about it, but it'd be interesting if you know what the title is.
Well, the title that I've picked out for it's actually the title of the first show that I did with Nucleus Portland, which was called The Muddle. So all the pieces I did for that first show were basically from the world that my graphic novel is going to be set in. So if you've seen the works from that, you'll kind of have an idea of how it will look.
Awesome. Very cool. I guess anything else that you'd want to put on people's radar that you got coming up for the year? Any events, print releases, stuff like that?
Nothing specific, but I am really excited for this trip to Scotland, and I'm going to be making a lot of new work from that. So I think just keep an eye out for the work that comes out of that.
Awesome. Very cool. So I guess last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody. Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Oh, man. That's a good one. Have you had Tegan White on your show?
I haven't, no. And I love Tegan. I love Tegan's work so much.
Yeah, she's great. So that would be cool. Or, sorry, I'm terrible with names when I'm on the spot, but Tegan would be really cool. So that's who I'm going to say.
Awesome. Very cool. Great choice. And I will do my best. So, but thank you so much for doing the show. This has really been a lot of fun. A pleasure talking to you and get to know more about you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you, Michael.
So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Lily. It was really lovely to hear how big of a presence that storytelling has been throughout her entire life. From the stories that she wrote as a kid that she read to her father, to all the wonderful tales that she writes about the characters that she paints in her artwork. Storytelling has been so, beautifully woven into the fabric of her life, and it was a treat to talk to her about that. You can definitely see the excitement and passion and enthusiasm that she has for it. It definitely seems like visual art and the written word make this wonderful partnership in her life. And up until now, we on the outside have only really seen half of that equation. So I was really stoked to hear about the graphic novel project that she started working on. For now, it sounds like the title of the book is going to be The Muddle, which was also the very first show that she had at Nucleus Portland, and features a lot of the characters that she's included in her work dating all the way back to that first show. So it was really nice to hear that she's ready to share that side of her work with the rest of the world. Definitely keep an eye on her Instagram feed to stay up to date with the latest on this. Also keep an eye out for the new works that she'll be creating following her trip with Light Gray Art Lab. It's obvious how much Lily loves and appreciates the nature and the environment around her, and how much inspiration she draws from those experiences. So I'm really eager to see what she ends up creating after she gets back from this trip. It sounds like she'll be posting a lot of what she makes on her social media, so definitely follow that to see how it all unfolds. So thanks again to Lily for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. And just a reminder, one big way you could help out if you're really enjoying the show would be to check out the show's Patreon. You can find all the details on patreon.com/artaffairs. And as always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.